AJAX is a very powerful JavaScript technology. It's not jQuery specific, but jQuery does it particularly well. It stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Let's just unpack that name a little bit. So the asynchronous means that it happens in the background. So you can be running other bits of JavaScript code at the same time as the AJAX is running. JavaScript just means that it's a JavaScript technology. And XML is a type of code that we'll actually look at later on in the APIs chapter. We don't really need to worry too much about what XML is at this stage. And in fact, AJAX doesn't work specifically with XML. You can use it with any type of file. An HTML file, a JSON file is another file type we'll look at in the APIs section. Essentially, what AJAX does is it allows you to load other files from your web server whilst the user is doing something without actually refreshing the page. It was pioneered by Google when they were working on the Gmail web app, and they wanted the web app to be as powerful as possible and to involve as fewer page loads as possible. So when you're using Gmail or now any webmail client, you'll notice that you can do lots of things without the page actually reloading at all. And that means that the user experience is much faster and much more like a desktop app. So a lot of the very common sites these days, such as, well, Google, Twitter, Facebook, a lot of the websites that you use every day use AJAX a great deal in order to make your experience much better. So AJAX is a really useful tool to use. Let's find out what we can do with it. Now, a slight complication of using AJAX and jQuery is that it doesn't work over what's called the file protocol. Now, what I mean by that is, so far we've been running our files directly off our own computer, and that means that in the address bar up here, instead of the usual HTTP, which you see when you're browsing a website, we're using the file protocol, so file:. Now, if I try and run AJAX on the file protocol, it won't work. So we need to do this part of the course on a real web server. So this is a good opportunity for me to remind you that you have free web hosting with this course. If you haven't set that up yet, then go to the first chapter of the course and find the videos that instruct you how to do that. Done that? Fantastic. So I'm going to go over to my Firefox setup here, where I've got Fire FTP installed. Again, if you can't get to this page, then go to the first section of the course and it will guide you through the process of getting here. So I've created a folder called Files on my completewebdevelopercourse.com website, and I'm going to create a new file there. So create file, and I'll call it index.html. And then I'm going to open that file, Command O, and that will open it up in Text Wrangler over here. Now I want the content of that index file to be the same as what I've got over here. So I'm going to copy all of that and paste it in. Great. One of the fantastic features of Fire FTP is that it will automatically save any changes that you make locally on the server itself. So let's just make sure that that's worked. If I go to completewebdevelopercourse.com/files/index.html, I can now see the AJAX title there. Great, so now I'm going to be editing the file on the server, not the file on my own computer, which will allow me to use AJAX. So with AJAX, I need a file to actually load the content of. So I'm going to go back to my server on Fire FTP and create another new file. I'll call it test.html. And then once that's created, I'll just open it up and put some basic content in there. So this is some content, very simple. You could put any HTML you like in there, but we'll keep it simple for now. and then I'll save that, and then I'll close that down, hide that part of the window. So now I'm just editing the index file. Always worth checking. Let's just make sure that that file is indeed online. Great. Okay, so let's go back to our index file and actually do some AJAX. So I'm going to start by showing you the jQuery get function. It's a very simple way to use AJAX and a great place to start. So how do we use it? We start with the string, as we so often do with jQuery, and then .get to call the get function. And then the only variable that we need to send to the get function is the location of our document that we want to load. So in this case, test.html. Great, that's it. That's our first AJAX call. If I refresh the page, nothing actually happens. That's because all we're doing here is getting the content of the test.html file. We're not actually doing anything with that content. So in order to do something with the content, we need to use a callback function, just like we did with the fade out function earlier. So we type function, and this time our function is going to need a variable, and that variable is, well, we'll call it data. And that data variable will be set to the value of the content of the test.html file. Just to say that again, what the get function does is it takes the content of the test.html file and puts it in the variable data. And then we can do whatever we like with it. So, as before, we use curly brackets to separate out our function, and then I'm just going to alert the variable data, which should alert the contents of the test.html file. Let's give it a go. There it is. Fantastic. So that might look extremely simple, but what we've done there is very, very powerful. We've taken a bit of content on our web server and we've loaded it into the page that we've got at the moment without actually refreshing the page. And before we looked at AJAX, we had no way of doing that. Great. So we've done our first introductory bit of AJAX. Now, the get function, however, is not what I'd recommend you use, generally speaking. I'd rather you use the AJAX function. Now, the get function is perfectly good and works perfectly well, but the AJAX function gives you a lot more control and power that the get function doesn't give you. Specifically, if the internet connection of the user goes down whilst they're using your website and you're using the get function, then just nothing will happen because they won't be able to get the results of the get call to your web server. Whereas with the AJAX function, you can set a fail method. So if the internet connection does go down, then you can alert the user to this fact and do something about it. So to call the AJAX function, we do a very similar thing to when we call the get function, and we just do string.ajax. And this time, the URL is actually given as part of a number of different variables that we could give to the function in the function call. So we separate all our variables out just like we did in the animate function in curly brackets. We're only actually going to have one variable here, and that's the URL. There are lots of different attributes that you can put in here, but we'll just have the one for now and we'll see others later on. Okay, so that is our AJAX call, and we want to have a callback function once again that alerts the data when it's returned. So we use the done function, and then within that we want to have a function. Oops, let's spell it right. And just as with the get command, we need a data variable to store the data from the test.html file. And we put that in curly brackets and then close the done function. And finally, we'll alert the data. Okay, let's take a look at that. There it is. Oh, that's actually the get function was returning first and then the AJAX function, so it's done it twice. So let's get rid of the get function because we don't need that anymore. And just make sure that all is well there. Fantastic. Okay, so just to show you another couple of things that you can do with the data function, maybe we want to change the content of the header to whatever is in that test.html file. So there's a quick challenge for you. See if you can do that. I hope you managed it. It's pretty straightforward. We just select the h1 element and then we set the HTML to data, or the value of the data variable. Let's see that in action. Fantastic. Really good. One final jQuery command to show you here is append, which can be a very useful way if you don't want to get rid of the content of your h1 tag, but you want to append something to it, so add something at the end of it, then you just use the append command, and then we'll see the h1 loads, and then the content of the HTML file loads after it. So that may seem a long way round getting some content from a file and putting it in, but what we've done there is actually extremely powerful, and we'll use it a lot to create complex and interesting and interactive and fast web applications.